It began not with music, but with a step. Awkward, trembling, almost out of sync with the soft jazz floating through the Bellamy room. But it was enough to make a room stop moving. Friday evenings wrapped the restaurant in amber glow, the kind filtered through etched windows and linen napkins. In one corner, a trio played slow waltz rhythms that barely rose above conversation, yet held everything in place. Couples drifted near the polished wooden floor between tables, more sway than dance, more memory than motion. At a quiet booth tucked along the side, an 8-year-old sat watching. His name was Jaime Voss. His feet, pressed flat beneath the table, twitched in small, stubborn rhythms, muscles misfiring like faulty wires. He didn't speak. He rarely did in public. His condition had a name, Doña, though labels did little to explain the sideways glances, the cautious silences, or the laughter he couldn't unhear from a fall 2 years ago in a children's museum. He hadn't stood in public since. Not unless he'd scanned the room first. Across from him sat his father, Harlan Voss. Real estate baron, stone-faced widower. His presence didn't comfort. It commanded. Harlan loved his son, but not in ways you could hear. Only in the way he positioned himself, like a shield too heavy to move. The Bellamy room was the only restaurant he trusted. Low lighting, booths in corners, and a maitre d' who knew the value of discretion. He didn't care for music, but Jaime did. And it wasn't the food that held Jaime's eyes. It was a woman. She moved between tables with the rhythm of someone who hadn't forgotten how to float. Her name tag read Clara. Clara Shaw. She wore her curls pinned up, her posture quiet, but balanced like something learned long ago. She was tall, black, and graceful in a way no apron could hide. She moved like she once belonged somewhere with lights and audiences. And she had. A decade ago, Clara danced center stage in a modern company downtown, until a torn ligament stopped the music. Since then, she worked on floors that didn't applaud, waited on guests who never looked up. But her body still knew rhythm. She carried trays like they were choreography. When she approached Jaime's table, lemonade pitcher in hand, his eyes dropped to her shoes, soft soles, worn leather. They bent the way dancers know to watch for. He spoke without looking up. "Do you still dance?" She blinked. No one had asked that in years. She crouched beside the table, not above him, but beside. Her voice dropped to meet his. "Only when someone leads." Jaime gripped the edge of his seat. Then, without permission or plan, he stood. It wasn't smooth. His knees shivered, his spine braced itself against itself. But he didn't fall. He turned to Clara, raised one hand. It wasn't confident, just open. She stared at it for a beat, then wiped her palm, set her tray down, and placed her fingers gently into his. He took a single step. She followed. And in the hush that followed, it felt like the entire room remembered how to breathe. His first step trembled more than it traveled. Jaime's foot shifted forward in a stuttered slide, toe brushing the floor, balance tipping like a scale unsure of its own weight. Clara didn't move ahead. She didn't offer a cue or shift her frame to stabilize him. She simply stood at his side and let the silence between them fill with trust. Her eyes stayed with him, not the crowd, not the reactions, just the boy trying to command his own body one heartbeat at a time. One more step. This time his knee bent too far inward, his hip rotating to correct, arms flinching for balance. It wasn't grace. It was survival. A language of movement only the determined ever learn. Clara matched him. Her own steps softened, adapting, not erasing, his rhythm. Her instinct, once trained to flow like water across stages, now flowed like understanding. There was no tempo to follow. Just him. Around them, the atmosphere shifted. A couple mid-sway paused as the man's hand drifted down from his partner's waist. Their gaze fixed, quietly unsure, on the strange new dance at the room's edge. A diner lifting a glass paused mid-sip. The pianist, fingers still trailing across ivory keys, let the song blur into something quieter. Half melody, half memory. Then Jaime faltered. His heel caught, his shoulder jerked forward. He froze in place, his body tensed with expectation. A laugh rose from one side of the room. Not loud, but real. Clara didn't turn. Instead, she met Jaime's eyes with a glance so slight it barely moved her chin. Her lips tilted, not wide, not rescuing, just steady. A silent signal. You're not alone. She shifted her footing. Not to correct him, to absorb the imbalance with him. Her hand remained in his, allowing him to feel the steadiness, not be replaced by it. More faces turned now. A server paused mid-pour. An older couple looked over their glasses. The laughter didn't grow, but it lingered, like a question no one wanted to voice. Clara left the noise behind her. She had chosen. The only one she followed was the boy who didn't know he was leading. Each step was awkward. Each step was truth. And slowly, the moment shifted. At a nearby table, a little girl whispered something to her mother. Not about the missteps, but about the way the woman held the boy's hand like something precious. Jaime took a third step, then a fourth. His head tilted, finally lifting to meet Clara's gaze. "Is it okay?" he whispered, breath hitching. Clara nodded. "It's perfect." She wasn't protecting him with the words. She was naming what she saw. Courage, not coordination. Movement, not mastery. A kind of honesty even dancers forget to reach for. Behind them, the piano softened further. Less a soundtrack now, more a witness. Tables quieted. Forks rested. People watched, not to judge, but because they didn't know what else to do in the presence of something rare. They took 5 steps. Maybe 6. It didn't matter. Each one existed for its own reason. Then, near the entrance, a man stood frozen. Harlan Voss. Phone in hand. Screen black. His call finished just minutes earlier. He had stepped out expecting stillness, and returned to motion. His son, his fragile, faltering son, was not just standing. He was moving. Not alone. Beside him, the waitress stood calm and proud, her hand in his, her gaze locked only on him. No correction, no control, only presence. Harlan's breath caught. He wanted to move, to intervene, to protect. But for the first time, his own body held him back, and not from fear, from awe. Harlan Voss, man of numbers, projections, and precise negotiations, had never encountered a moment he couldn't control. Until now. He stood rooted at the dining room entrance, unsure whether to move forward or disappear. The room had gone silent, not in discomfort, but in reverence. The sound of Jaime's foot brushing the polished floor seemed to echo through the Bellamy room like a solo note on an empty stage. The pianist's hands hung still over the keys, frozen mid-measure. No crescendo, no applause, just stillness. For the first time, Harlan realized no one was mocking, no one scoffed. The room wasn't watching with ridicule. It was holding its breath. And so was he. He looked to Clara. She hadn't looked back. Her focus remained entirely on Jaime. Her posture wasn't fixed, but attuned, like she was following a frequency no one else could hear. She didn't guide him. She mirrored him. His uncertainty became her rhythm. His pauses, her tempo. Jaime's right foot hovered for a moment, uncertain. Then Clara whispered, not to the room, not for effect, but to him. "Keep going. I'm still here." The words weren't loud, but they carried. Harlan heard them, and they cut through something thick and ancient in him, something packed down over years of worry and weight. A crack opened, not a break, but a beginning. Jaime stepped forward again. No tremble, no pause. It was small, barely noticeable to anyone not watching for it. But Harlan was watching, and it hit him like a wave. For the first time, Jaime moved without flinching, and Harlan felt something strange rise in his chest, something messy. It wasn't just pride, it was fear, guilt, relief. He couldn't name it. He only knew that the boy who once needed guarding now led a quiet revolution, step by uneven step. No applause followed, no cameras clicked. The room didn't need a script. It simply watched. And in that silent watching, something sacred unfolded. Harlan lowered his phone. The screen's glow faded in his palm. Clara never looked his way, but Harlan saw her every movement, every subtle shift of balance, every moment she allowed herself to be pulled slightly off-center, just to remain in Jaime's rhythm. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't guidance. It was belief. Something in Harlan's chest turned. A slow, deliberate click, like a key inside an old lock. He remained at the edge of the room, hands loose at his sides, unwilling to interrupt, unable to look away. The drive home was quiet, not uncomfortable quiet. Just a silence filled with everything that didn't need words. Jaime stared out the window, city lights drawing blurred gold lines through the glass. Harlan kept his hands at 10 and 2, eyes ahead. Neither mentioned what had happened. Not the music. Not the movement. Not the moment. When they pulled into the driveway, the house glowed faintly. The porch light spilled across the bricks. Shadows stretched across the walk. Still, neither unbuckled. Jaime was the first to speak. "I don't think you have to hold my hand so much anymore," he said, soft, not looking over. Harlan turned his head slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know I could fall, but I think I can lead too, if someone lets me." The words weren't loud, weren't dramatic, just honest. Offered carefully, like a fragile gift that might not survive the weight of response. Harlan opened his mouth, closed it. He had heard confessions, pleas, arguments. This wasn't any of those. It was identity, spoken gently. "I always held your hand to keep you safe," he said finally. "I know," Jaime replied. "But sometimes, when you hold too tight, it's harder to move." And that truth sat between them like something earned. Every scraped knee, every slip, every failed step. Harlan had always responded the same way. Reach down, lift him up, decide what came next. That had been the rhythm of their life. It never occurred to him that Jaime might want to fall without help. Not until last night. Not until Clara had placed her trust, not in him, but in Jaime. And Jaime had risen. A soft click pulled him from thought. Jaime unbuckled his seatbelt. He opened the door but paused before stepping out. "I'm not saying I don't need you," he said. I don't always want to be the one being led." Harlan turned. Really looked. Jaime's round face, his thin frame, the quiet force behind his words. It wasn't rebellion. It was clarity. For once, Harlan didn't see fragility. He saw a child trying to own space in a world that rarely offered it. He said nothing. There was nothing to argue. Jaime hadn't asked permission. He simply spoke truth. Harlan gave a small nod, barely more than a breath. Jaime smiled, subtle and sure, then stepped out, closing the door behind him. Harlan remained in the driver's seat a long moment, listening to the stillness. Last night, his son had taken the lead, and he was still catching up. The next morning, Harlan returned to the Bellamy room. No reservations, no phone call. Just the quiet echo of a moment that refused to let go. The restaurant was empty of guests, but sunlight filled the space where music had once lingered. Shadows stretched across the floor, right where Jaime had stood. Behind the bar, Clara polished glasses in slow circles. Her posture was easy, but alert. When the door opened, she looked up, neutral at first, then softer. "Mr. Voss," she said. Not cold, not warm, just steady. Harlan approached, still in a tailored suit. But something about his stride felt different. Less armor, more inquiry. "You weren't afraid," he said quietly. When he stood up, Clara paused. "Afraid of what?" "That he'd fall, or worse, be laughed at?" She set the glass down with care. "You mean, was I afraid he'd fail?" Harlan didn't answer, but the silence between them did. "No," Clara said finally. "I wasn't afraid he'd fall." She folded the towel, eyes meeting his. "I was afraid no one would follow." She let that sit. That he'd reach out, invite someone to move with him, and be left standing alone. The room stilled. Clara leaned forward slightly. "Kids like Jaime, they're always being guided, told, corrected. It's meant with love. But sometimes it teaches them that they're only safe if someone else controls the next step. Harlan stared at the space where his son had danced. He could have gotten hurt, he said. Clara nodded. Yes, but he didn't. She waited, then added softer. And if he had, it would have been his choice, not something wrapped in fear and labeled protection. Harlan swallowed. The word choice echoed somewhere deep. It wasn't failure she feared. It was loneliness. And now he understood why. Clara's words weren't cruel. They were clean, like glass. Sharp in honesty, impossible to look through without seeing yourself. Harlan didn't speak. He stared at a knot in the wood grain of the bar like it might offer him an answer. Then softly, Clara added, "You looked like you were going to stop him." "I was," Harlan admitted. "So why didn't you?" He pressed his lips together before finally saying, "Because he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at you." Clara nodded, barely. "He was leading," she said. And I said yes. That was it. No sermon, no rebuke, just the truth. Harlan pulled out a stool and sat. He didn't argue. He didn't justify. He just sat and listened. For the first time in years, he let the silence shape him. The community dance studio was nothing special from the outside. Old firehouse, chipped paint, crooked sign, open hands movement center. But inside, motion bloomed. Children moved, some in braces, others guided gently by therapists or parents, and some, astonishingly, moved alone. Clara was kneeling beside a boy with a walker, showing him how to shift his weight with patience. She didn't overcorrect. She didn't rush to catch him. She waited until he found his own footing. Only then did she look up. "I figured you'd come," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "I'm not here to thank you," Harlan said plainly. "I didn't expect you to." They stood there quiet. He looked past her to the scuffed studio floor, marked by dozens of hesitant feet. "I don't need someone to teach Jaime how to dance," he said. Clara waited. "I need someone to teach me how not to hold him back. How to stop dragging him through everything." The words felt strange in his mouth. Too real. Too raw. But also right. He had spent years building fences around his son in the name of love. What if Jaime needed open doors instead? Clara didn't reply immediately. Then she extended her hand. "Then start by stepping where he steps," she said. "Not where you think he should go." Harlan looked at her hand, then took it. Her grip was steady, present. She led him to the edge of the studio where music floated again, soft and untimed. A boy with a prosthetic leg guided his mother through uneven sidesteps. Another twirled wildly, laughing as his arms flailed with joy. "You see them dancing?" Clara said, voice low. "They're not following the beat. They're following each other." Harlan exhaled. "I thought my job was to keep Jaime upright." Clara glanced at him. "Maybe your job is to stop pulling him off balance when he's found his own." He nodded slowly. "Where do I start?" She gestured to the floor. "Right there." Then softer. One step behind him. "Don't pull. Just follow." He was scheduled last. Not to close the show with grandeur, but because Clara had quietly asked the organizers to place him there, at the end, where something new might begin. The announcer, clipboard in hand, stepped to the mic. "Our next performer," she said with a warm smile, "has no music, no partner, just a direction. And sometimes, that's all you need." She stepped aside, and Jaime walked out. The auditorium didn't erupt. No clapping, no music swell. Just silence. Unsure. Waiting. He moved to the center. His stance was uneven, arms at his sides, knees bent slightly like he wasn't sure whether to stay or go. For one long second, it looked like he might retreat, but he didn't. His left foot shifted forward. Not far, not fast, just deliberate. His arm lifted slightly to balance, almost unconsciously. Then came his right, landing with care. This wasn't dance. Not how anyone was taught to understand it. There was no choreography, no polished routine, just movement, pure and unscripted. And something shifted. In the third row, a woman stood. She didn't say anything. She simply stepped into the aisle and mirrored him. Awkward, but sure. A man in a wheelchair turned and wheeled forward, positioning himself with purpose. Then another person stood. And another. A teenage girl. A father. A teacher. They weren't approaching him. They were moving with him. Step by uncertain step, Jaime kept going. He turned, bent too far, wobbled, but he never stopped. He never looked back. He didn't see the crowd rising. But they rose. Backstage, Clara stood beside Harlan, arms folded, expression unreadable, but her eyes shimmered. Harlan leaned in, voice low. "What is he doing?" There was no sarcasm in his tone, just reverence. Clara didn't break her gaze from the stage. "He's not dancing," she said. "He's leading." Jaime stood near the edge now, his chest rising with effort, his arms raised, not to receive applause, but to hold space, as if the air around him had become sacred by motion alone. Below him, a third of the audience moved. Not well, not in rhythm, but they moved. Awkward sidesteps, nods, slow turns, not in imitation, in solidarity. There was no spotlight, no music cue, no dramatic finish. But somehow the room felt fuller, warmer, shifted by a single boy's decision to move on his own terms. In life, we spend so much time steering. Our children, our partners, those we believe need us. We think safety means direction. That guidance is control. But then comes a moment, quiet, unexpected, when someone we love takes a step without us. Not away, just forward. And we have to choose, not whether to protect them, but whether to let ourselves be led. Jaime didn't lead with strength. He led with presence. He led because he moved, and trusted that someone might follow. Clara didn't follow because she had to. She followed because she believed in his direction. Sometimes we teach, sometimes we lead. But wisdom, real wisdom, means knowing when to stop steering and start stepping into the unknown beside someone braver than you expected. There's no shame in following someone who walks differently, speaks softer, or moves slower. Because the most powerful movement isn't always the loudest. It's the one that makes others rise. So if you've ever believed leadership was beyond you, too hard, too far, too graceful, remember this. To follow takes humility. To be followed takes courage. And sometimes the bravest step is the first one someone else chooses to trust.